Hello, everyone. Welcome to this roundtable discussion on building a future-ready workplace with continuous learning. I'm Pooja Bhutra, Senior Content Lead, ETHRWorld, and your host for this session. I will take a minute or two to share the context. We know organizations are looking at newer digital technologies to innovate processes, meet consumer expectations, and penetrate new markets. For instance, a demand in data science skills is inevitable in the workplace as companies benefit from mining data to predict consumer behaviors and identify new revenue opportunities. One of the main problems in tech adoption is the skill gap among the existing employees. To mitigate that, employers are designing a multifaceted continuous learning framework. In this roundtable brought to you by ETHRWorld and Great Learning, we will highlight the best practices in continuous learning in the wake of enterprise learning. I would now like to welcome the domain experts from the industry to share their perspectives on how lifelong learning is becoming increasingly critical for companies and employees. Please join me in welcoming the distinguished panel. Vidisha Banerjee, Global Group VP Talent, Culture and Employer Branding for Wellspun Group. Anil Santhapuri, Director L&D, APAC, Strategic Business Unit, CGI. Sakar Anand, Country Head and Head of HR, BMC Software India. Anand Palekar, VP and Head L&D, Wells Fargo. Radhika Anand, Talent Development Leader at AstraZeneca. And Ritesh Malhotra, Business Head Enterprise, Great Learning. I want to address the viewers also. Hello viewers, welcome to this roundtable, and please share your questions for the distinguished panel using the chat tab. I shall take your questions throughout the session. Since we are discussing continuous learning, I want to bring Ritesh first, who represents the academia, and ask him why is continuous learning important for business right now. Welcome to the show, and over to you, Ritesh.
Thank you very much, Pooja, and thank you for getting us all together. It's quite a diverse panel today. See, on this topic of continuous learning, given we have people from a variety of industries, why don't I just take a stab at it on the IT industry and talk about why it's important and what we are witnessing. Between the large 6 firms, IT firms, this year, they're planning to hire anywhere between 200,000 to 250,000 freshers. That's a number that comes into our IT organizations pretty much every year. And sadly enough, over the next 2 or 3 years, they will lose about 30% of that number. Right now, that's a huge attrition figure for the organizations. And our belief is that the compounding effect of knowledge when employees stick around with an organization is immense. So the good thing is that our partners are now thinking about it deeply, and a lot of them are coming to us, trying to work with us from an early stage as people come into organizations. So continuous learning starts not when an employee now enters the organization, but when the employee is a prospective employee is at the college campus. So that's when we start engaging with them and actually start developing and training them for an organization. That's where their learning starts. And then once they enter the organization and they've delivered for a few years, and then they're ready to be experts in their respective domains, then we develop them with skill certificates for the area like digital science, AI, machine learning, whichever area they want to be in. So then we arm them with these expert certificates. And then after that, after they've been domain experts for a few years and delivered for the organization, then it's time for them to grow into leadership positions. And then there are different kind of programs for them. What we've seen across our customer base, organizations that take this approach early on and start working with them early, there is at least about 50% improvement in reduction in attrition rates. So I think there is a lot of work happening in the industry. A lot of companies work with us quite closely to develop skills frameworks, learning journeys, learning paths, and lifelong learning pathways for individuals, so that this problem is solved. And probably it's time for you to invite some thoughts from leaders from a variety of other industries as to how it's done in their respective areas.
Sure, Ritesh. And, there is research that shows that our brain is programmed to retain only recently learned information, which means it tends to forget knowledge and skills that are not used frequently. So that also establishes a need for continuous learning. Radhika, I'll go to you next. The pharma ecosystem is becoming more client-specific, consuming digital and intelligent technologies speedily in every aspect of the business. How are you preparing the workforce to keep up with the pace of transformation?
Yeah, thanks, Pooja. Firstly, I think it's exciting to join this panel for this conversation. And you rightly said, I think healthcare, or if I have to talk life sciences, they're really going in for this transformation, wherein the way we consume healthcare has also changed, and that's putting the onus back on the organizations on how are they transforming. So I think one piece that you've been talking about, and I think you and Ritesh both talked about, is that culture of lifelong learning. Now, I think for us, the relevance is that it's when the industry is transforming, you need to transform your workforce as well. So I think firstly, it starts from the mindset. And that's where, establishing this culture becomes really, really important. And there's a lot of work that we're doing in that space. The second piece is that, how are you looking at the overall learning ecosystem that you're creating for your employees? That it's not really a push anymore. But I think one, it starts from the mindset wherein it becomes a push that, if you want to be relevant in this ecosystem, you need to change. So that's the first piece that we're working on. And that's where the culture piece comes in. And then the second piece is that how are you equipping the organization to really make the change? And then that's where you create that overall ecosystem, which is around the exposure to experience to education. And how are you kind of, changing the way our employees really consume content. So a large part of focus is about, creating ecosystem where people can self-consume content basis where they see that they are in their own, learning and skill journey. And they have information, education at access, which they can consume. That's first piece. And we have a tiered level path basically for each of the career, tracks that we have, where you have a level 1, level 2, level 3, and they're very clearly aligned, pathways for you to build on those skills. So I think one of the pieces that we've done recently for last 2 years, we've been working on that space is really defining what are those skills for future, and then really defining the tracks which people could look at on undertaking to really build on those skills which may not be relevant today, but makes them relevant for future. And that's how we're really working around this space. And I think for us, the relevance is just not the tech, organization that we have within AstraZeneca, but I have to say it's all the roles which are transforming. And I think it's a similar experience or similar career tracks that we've been able to create across the organization.
Very interesting, Radhika, and I really, like the sound of these 3 pillars that you talked about: exposure, experience, and education. Very interesting. Bitisha, I'll come to you next. You represent a conglomerate having diverse businesses. I understand they must all be at different stages in the skill gap trajectory. What are some of the key drivers of your L&D strategy?
Thank you, Pooja, for that excellent question. And it's great to be here with all the panelists and also all the participants here. So I think, for us, when we look at a conglomerate and we look at various businesses, so part of our business is, of course, in textiles, which we are mostly known for, but we also have an infrastructure business, a flooring business, a pipes and steel business, right? So when you look at it, from a large scale intervention in terms of saying, hey, we have to get our workforce ready for the future. And what are some of the pillars, what are the levers that we need to really look at and which would probably serve everyone? Now, having said that, one must remember that, one's size can never fit all. So we have a very different approach in WellSpan. What we do is for certain leaders and certain skills, we have a group approach. So from that point of view, everyone at the group level gets covered with, let's say, right now we are running a campaign called Future Skills, where we've also partnered with NASSCOM at this moment, and it's free for all education on digital transformation for everyone. Now that is something that is uniquely given to all group employees. But when you look at different group organization, when you look at functional and technical skills, that will differ. So very much like Radhika mentioned, we also have a career framework. And sometimes the question is in the minds of the learners, because honestly, with COVID in the last 2 years been so crazy in terms of hectic, in terms of workplace, sometimes I really put myself in the learner's shoe and say, do they have the bandwidth to really consume what we are throwing at them? And many times the answer is no. So in that case, when they have their, hands full with 12 hours of job, when is it that they're going to learn? And, many times we all L&D folks and HR folks appreciate and understand the need for continuous learning. But for an employee, what really matters is, how do I get this job done? And even if I sign up for a course or sign up for a program, what's in it for me? So what we've done in Wellspun, considering I also look after talent management, we've actually tried to make career frameworks that are linked to learning. So very clearly, every individual within Wellspun has the visibility to look at different career frameworks. So what is it that I want to do or I need to do if I have to go vertically, diagonally, and horizontally? And once that is clear, then she or he has an incentive saying that, I want to be learning continuously because, I've had the choice to sort of choose where I want to take my career to, right? So this is an approach that we take. One is that certain things that we come up at the group level and we say, hey, this is mandatory, this is hygiene, everybody needs to go through this. But at the same time, we sort of customize and we narrow it down to the last person, to the individual, and say, hey, these are the 3 options from a career standpoint of view. And to get ahead anywhere through assessment centers and learning plans that are available, these are the programs, these are the competencies you need to build, and you can build them through these programs. So I think I'd like to say that, certainly my heart goes out to all our employees. And, I think they have been amazing over the last 2 years, and there is so much to do, like I'm saying again. But I think for us, what has worked is a clear connection between continuous learning and asking the question to employees and giving them the answer, this is the reason you need to learn continuously. I think that also kind of takes the pressure off HR and L&D teams, because it's intrinsically, employees are motivated then to keep them updated because they can clearly see a career charter in front of them, right? So that's the approach we take, Pooja. Thank you so much.
Very interesting, Vidisha. And I totally agree that employees do need a skilling roadmap. And your career framework or learning framework really helps to, get the perspective in place. Anil, I'll go to you next and I'll ask you very simply, how do you plan the skilling calendar for your organization? It'll be great if you throw some light on research that goes to create it so that you ensure it's connected to a tangible outcome.
It was great to hear the comments I heard, from all of you, the speakers ahead of me, like tying it to talent roadmap is a great idea, and then a couple of other, thoughts. So first of all, Pooja, in your question, you said, what research do you do to roll out calendar of programs? I think offering a training calendar itself is like archaic and outdated in a way, because you put a calendar, you do things around that, because things with digital platforms, and again we heard platform called Future Skills from NASCOM, so on and so forth. Now the idea is to give place and time for people depending on where they are. Could be classroom, virtual at their own time, or cohort learning, so on and so forth. So there's place for calendar programs, which we still do, but the percentages shift massively compared to 2 to 3 years ago. There's a lot of learning which is happening self-paced online, both tech and dev, so both technical and also development, including practice labs, because I represent an IT organization. But I have to quickly summarize a couple of ways in which we do the research. First one is obviously what our clients are asking for. At CGI every year, we interview around over 1,000 CXOs globally every year. So there's a lot of information and insights which we get, which some of those are published on our website publicly also. It's called Voice of Customers, which all of us can go and see. So if I had to kind of summarize it, what we do is we hear from all the CXOs across industries and group what we are hearing into 3 categories. We call them maturing skills, scaling skills, and emerging. So maturing is skills which are currently already applied at scale. Technologies, let's say technology applied at scale. Scaling are technologies which are being piloted now and have a potential to scale in a couple of years from now. And emerging are areas which people want to explore with a horizon of 3 to 5 years. So that gives us a very good roadmap of where the industry is going from an emerging tech, emerging skills, and where our clients want to go from their own digital transformation journey. And then we work backwards to say if we have to help our customers build on that journey, now how do we keep our internal capability ready? And then we that's like the big drive which takes us forward. Obviously, the second one is more bottoms up, looking at what we actually have with the existing members. And again, it starts with something as simple as a skill inventory catalog, where, again, being an IT service organization, if we kind of categorize skills and sub-skills, it spans over easily 2,000 to 3,000 sub-skills. So looking at, which of our employees has which skill and sub-skill at which proficiency level, and having a roll up and a roll down report that way. And then once you have the skill inventory, it's easy to tag against that skill or sub-skill what learning assets you have from a training program or a platform, so on and so forth. So that itself gives a wealth of information to identify what gaps you have at an employee level or a group of employees or a division or a function, so on and so forth. That's another way to take a very grounds up. And that's where talent management comes in handy. We look at HRIS system, their profiles, and how all the information is there. The third piece is the most traditional one, which is the classical training needs assessment, which we roll out twice a year formally and kind of iterate it every quarter. So typically in training needs, a completely automated survey, which is built on skill inventory catalog, goes out to all managers. And then, we take inputs from them more from immediate needs in their projects. So, and the last one, which we're currently learning, is because we have quite a few digital learning platforms, like most of our colleagues here, there's a lot of real-time data being generated in the platforms itself. So one of the LXPs we use has this, like straight away I can log in now and see what are the skill hotspots. Where are our members actually spending time? Which skills are they learning? And we don't know why they're learning, but that's their aspiration, right? So that's more at a very employee level. What are their aspirations? So that's another input coming. So essentially, these are 4, 5, 6 sets of data. Some are more timed, come at one part of the year. Other are more real-time. The idea is to bring all of them together and then come out with some certain offerings. So yeah, I try to kind of summarize all that into a couple of minutes. Hopefully that helps, Pooja.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for those points. I'm sure, the viewers must be finding all this very insightful. I'll quickly go to Anand and ask you, how are you building capabilities to keep up with emerging technology skills in the GSC environment? Over to you, Anand.
Right. So GCC environment, so I represent a bank, and if you look at us, we're largely built off technology and banking operations and analytics. And I think your question is, how do you look at emerging technologies creeping into this environment, right? And we have a fairly large risk organization, which is also now getting a lot of technologies coming in. Now, there are two parts to this, the way we look at it. And I probably, every organization is either doing it or struggling with it. But one is, of course, we fairly in tune and closely work with business to ensure that those required capabilities are addressed. The other is we've actually created a platform which addresses the question you asked for the larger audience. And I'm talking of the non-technology, because the technology group has got a very separate treatment with respect to emerging technologies. So we got a separate strategy for our technology folks. We have a separate strategy for our operations folks. And in the operations folks, we've looked at it this way, right? You cannot just have technologies in isolation. So you have emerging technologies, you have banking domain, and you have emerging skills. And we kind of pepper that with digital leadership to bring our entire framework together. And so that's how we largely approach it. With respect to technologies, we've identified which ones are the ones which will make a fair amount of impact to the banking sector. And then we have curated content, I think, to a certain extent, the way Vidisha was also talking about. You have learning parts created for these, whether it's AI, ML, and largely at an awareness level, because that's where you begin your journey first. Once you have gone through the awareness level, then you move to a more expert level journey. And then we have a little more focused parts created to build automation experts data experts. And that's where we are at this point of time. How does it help? See, future of work, we're all evolving into it. The last 2 years has moved our customers very rapidly into the digital environment. So we've been thrust in the digital environment. Our customers have been, and that is deciding the way we're going to run our business. And that is going to determine the kind of skills and talent that we require. And that's on an upswing quite a bit. So how do I create an environment for my larger operations environment to get the potential to scale themselves? And that is the framework that we actually put together. So it's very simple, actually. We've looked at awareness to start with. We've then gone in deeper to say what kind of roles, what kind of jobs would we probably require. Give them the opportunity to build skill. So we call it deep skilling. So we then go into deep skilling. And then we look at either how can they probably do innovation projects in the existing environment they are in, or they could probably apply for jobs that are coming up. Yes, there is a possibility that we may also lose them, but I think that's fair because we are really giving them an opportunity to build their knowledge and skill set in emerging technologies. I hope that helps your question.
Yeah, interesting, Anand. Sakar, over to you. Sorry to have kept you waiting for so long. The question is, what is BMC's vision for continuous learning, and how are you aligning that with what employees want?
Thank you, Pooja. First of all, thank you for having me on this forum. It's a pleasure to hear different panelists and also speak to the participants. So talking about BMC, Pooja, we are in an enterprise product space. And many times we actually, tell our customers about the needs that they might not have identified. And, we are in the center of what I call another industrial revolution, wherein every business is becoming a software business today. And we help our customers become what we call an autonomous digital enterprise. Now, what I mean by that is, very similar to what Anand was saying, we help our customers convert data into meaningful information. We help them use that information to make decisions and automate those decisions with the highest level of security. Now, with this vision that we go to our customers, we ourselves need to become an ADE, the Autonomous Digital Enterprise internally. BMC needs to become one. Now, for that to happen, we have skills for the future that we have identified, which are very similar to that, what everybody talked about. There are data science, artificial intelligence, machine learning, natural language processing, cybersecurity. Now, this forms the basis of our future learning, which also then brings in the whole culture of continuous learning in the organization, because many of our employees who've been with us for a long time might not have these skills, and we need to help them acquire these skills. Now, how we do it is very similar to what Radhika and Vidisha talked about, Anil talked about, Anand talked about, is aligning it to a job architecture that we have in the organization, right? And I just go a little deeper into, in a job architecture, you've got different job families, and in job families, you've got different roles and levels. And as you progress from one role to another, the level of expertise that you need to procure or acquire in those skills, it just varies, and the complexity becomes higher as you move across levels. You need to now tie this job architecture to a learning platform. Again, very similar to what everybody else was talking, these learning platforms that we have today are such that when somebody goes and starts a learning journey, they help them curate a personalized learning path for themselves. And in those learning paths, what happens is that, I pick up a skill, I go look at my level of expertise. To pick up my level of expertise, I need to take an assessment. And this assessment score that I get is a percentile score of anybody who's taken that assessment across the world, right? So I'm just not localizing myself. I am looking at myself on the global yardstick. So with this framework in mind, what we do is we provide our employees a chance to learn anytime and anywhere and go to the required level of depth based on their choice. And I think Anil talked about the fact that you don't have learning calendars these days. Classroom learning is somebody even becoming obsolete unless you really have a need for an instructor to come and teach you something. Today's world of digital natives, employees want to learn at their own pace. So with these, with a clear vision from the organization as to where do we want to go, what skills we need to acquire for the future, we give our employees a chance to pick up those skills. Now, what we do in addition to this is we do Future Skills Month. So every month we identify a skill, and there what we do is we bring experts from the industry to come and talk to our employees, and we try to give our employees a perspective from different industries, so that they understand how that particular skill is being used in industries. Maybe as we said, it could be pharma, it could be manufacturing, it could be a bank. Now, with those sessions, what we do is if we do a session in the first month of a quarter, we give our employees a month to think through it. And the third month, we do a showcase event on that skill, so that employees now come and bring a proof of concept on how they would use that skill to solve a real world problem. I forget, but one of our panelists talked about the fact that a skill is theoretical knowledge unless you apply it on the job. So when we talk about the skills, the only additional step that we do is once we have conducted those talks, we allow our employees a time to build a proof of concept, which then they come and showcase to the rest of the employees. And that's where we bring an on-the-job implementation of the skill that an employee has done. I hope I was able to come to the point that you're looking for.
Yes, Sakar. And I think at the end of this first round, we've all established the fact that, everybody is having a robust skilling strategy, and there is a lot of research that has gone. Mapping has been done with respect to skills, and skills also have been curated based on, what your clients need and what your clients are going through. Next, I just asked Ritesh to come in, and my question to him is that why do companies engage with great learning? And some of them are also curating their own content. So what role does great learning play in partnering with industry?
Okay, let me pick up where all the panelists left. And I think when in the last round or discussion, Pooja, we heard clearly from everybody about the importance of learning pathways, customizing journeys, giving clarity to individuals about their career paths and so on. We've had the privilege of working with several partners over the years, and we've also have been in this privileged position where we've been able to analyze the impact of each of these components that they talk about, right? What impact does high quality content have on learning outcomes versus what impact does high quality delivery or blended delivery have on learning outcomes? What impact does learning pathways and academic interventions have? So we've had the privilege of analyzing all of that data. And one point that I'd like to make, and this is more for practitioners who are listening in, is that the highest impact that we've noticed has been through tech intervention, bringing all of this together. So from an organization's point of view, or from an employee's point of view, who wants to see his own growth path, right? Nothing motivates or inspires them more than actually seeing and understanding everything through one consolidated platform. Many times we witness several of our customers and partners who have over the years accumulated a lot of tech platforms, technology programs from a variety of suppliers, right? Bringing it all together is very, very important. Some of the panelists talked about it, but I think in quantitative terms, that's the highest impact that we see in terms of learning outcome. If you can clearly lay it out for every individual and they understand as they come into the organization what their learning journey should be for sustained success with an organization. Nothing has higher impact than that. So I just wanted to make that point. As for your second question, organizations come to us for pretty much everything. Like I said, we start working with freshers when they're still in college and developing them on programs which have been pre-agreed and designed for an organization. So as a result of it, when individuals come into the organization, they are already aware of what the organization expects, what sort of projects will they be deployed on, what sort of outcomes do their managers expect from them. So it really shortens their time to settle and be productive in an organization. So that's one variety of programs that we do for organizations. The second is we build experts in the areas of technology, data, and management. In technology areas like cloud, full stack, DevOps, cybersecurity, which are all future demand skills. And in data, AI, machine learning, big data, data sciences, all of these, and a variety of programs around it. And likewise, we have programs for senior leaders or mid-tier leaders who want to progress to being leaders of various domains. So these are standard programs that organizations use. What they've also started coming to us now is building learning journeys. These career paths, developing the career paths, because you have to go back constantly and be in touch with not just what's latest and best in the industry, but also in academia. Right? And it's very tough for an organization to do all of that together. But us being an education partner, we already have tie-ups with these top universities as well as industry, so we can bring it all together. So they come to us for a lot of advice now. Can we help them design a future a learning for life program for their organization? In fact, a few of them quite recently have started coming to us for being partners in their own internal academies, which was quite interesting for us. The organizations have to do a tremendous amount of work building content, building programs, then delivering them, then keeping them updated. And it's not easy for an organization to do that as part of the internal academy. So a lot of them are now asking us, can Great Learning be that academy for our people? So that's how our role is evolving with partners, and that's what we do.
I agree, Ritesh. I feel academia still plays a key role in reskilling, upskilling, because a lot of research goes in curating that kind of content. In the next part of the session, I would request you to, we'll make this session very conversational. So feel free to, come in with another follow-up point after a panelist has shared a point. And since we'll also be taking audience question, so, you can just nominate yourself to answer a particular question. So I'll just take a few audience questions now. This question is by Amit. Amit is asking, it's good to talk about lifelong learning. How do we set this up? According to the experts in this panel, what percentage of people are agile to have this mindset in an organization? And what is being done in your respective organization to build this transformation? Is there any way to measure this? Radhika,
I can pick this up.
Yes, thank you.
So I think, if you talk about learning, so I think it really stands from, what's your organization strategy or where it's going. And it has to be a part of it. And that's only you will be able to sell this piece. Because like what you said, right, that, we don't have time. I think time is the most essential resource in today's world. And if you don't see that there is a value in investing that time on this piece, people are not going to adapt to it. So I think, I can talk about what we did and, what's been our journey. I think it's very closely tied to where AstraZeneca as an organization was heading to. And for you to make that destination, this was one of the strategic levers that you need to transform. And that's where we said that if you have to transform, you really need that culture wherein we are agile to constantly reskill ourselves for us to be relevant in that future world that we are envisaging as a strategy for 2025 or 2030. And I think that's where we tied this to. And then, as you do any cultural transformation, this was the biggest transformation that we made in terms of, where we wanted the organization. So today, learning is not something which is siloed to only looking at where your career is or how you're able to do your job. But I think it's very essentially a part of every element of how an employee experiences this organization. So an example of that could be that today, when we look at well-being, our well-being is not really only the physical, mental, or social well-being, but it's also about how are we nurturing that curiosity within our own employees, and how is that connected to everything that we do with rewards? Is there an element there which also takes care of this nurturing that culture of curiosity or culture of learning? Why I'm giving that example is essentially becomes that how are you wanting to make that cultural transformation, and is it really coming through in everything that you're doing? The second piece is how we look at performance. It's gone away from the fact that, yeah, you've delivered what's what, but I think we started putting a premium on how. Again, here, agility is what you started putting premium on, that if there was a challenge or a situation, how well were you able to pivot to it? How well were you able to go back, change gears, reskill yourselves, come back and reinvent? And there is a premium that we put on that when we look at the overall contribution. So it's essentially, it has to talk through all elements. I think another piece that we're looking at right now is that, how we look at future potential or, talent for future, or how we even identify their eligibility for something which is where we're wanting to make a significant investment. What we're trying to see is how well are you consuming the content which is already available to you. So I think it's about, how are you wanting to blend that in the way you work or operate within the overall, I would say it's basically learning as a function of, how you create the entire work ecosystem. And I think that's the first answer to, how you really bring in that mindset, wherein you've given that premium to agility and saying that this is what really takes you wherever. We're okay if you don't have the core skill for now because we can teach you that. But are you agile to pick up the next opportunity which is coming your way? And that's the way we've been able to establish this culture across, different business areas that we have. So that's broadly, I would say, in terms of now where is the ROI? I think the ROI has to be on that, if I have to talk about the pandemic, or I have to talk about everything that we're delivering, or the entire transformation strategy that we are we on track on it? Are we able to look at what's the internal and an external mix that we're looking at when we're looking at this future talent for those new roles? What's the blend? And that's how we are really today looking at the ROI of this entire cultural transformation that we're making, right from how we're looking at our succession tracks really, coming around, and what's the kind of talent that we are internally able to find to really fill in those positions of future, to how you're looking at, the roles which really require the newer skills, and you're able to kind of see that your internal talent is able to transform and, look at those roles. And those are clearly measurable KPIs that we're looking at, and even the leaders are looking at, to see that whether this entire cultural transformation and the investment behind creating this right platforms to encourage that, is that really making sense? So that's what we're doing in this space.
Thank you, Radhika, on Amit's behalf. This is really helpful. You've given a very long and elaborate answer. Thank you.
I would just like to add to what what Radhika was saying. I think one of the most important ways of bringing a continuous learning kind of a culture in an organization is to tie it to performance goals.
Yeah.
And what you deliver is important, but what you have learned is equally important. And when you start a year, what were your skills and what additional skills have you acquired, and where have you shown the intent to use those skills needs to be a part of the goals that an employee is measured on. If organizations start doing that, that's where continuous learning becomes a part of the culture, and employees realize that they cannot rest on their past laurels. They need to be future ready.
Interesting, Sakar.
I have an even more interesting point to add there, Pooja. What Sakar said, we request that of each and every one of our partners for every engagement that we get into, right at the beginning, when we're designing the programs. So at that point in time, our requests go to both HR and L&D, as well as sometimes to business, that an individual's interest in the program and how much passion they demonstrate, and as an outcome of that, how much they learn, will always be driven by what sort of outcome is there for them at the end as a reward in the organization. Surprisingly though, while everybody agrees and acknowledges it, several aren't able to do anything about it. I think somewhere, I feel that learning is still looked at as an aid or a tool or a development incentive being given to an employee. But organizations somewhere shy away from actually making it a part of their career development story, just like Sakar said. So, maybe that's something for the audience to ponder over. People who are in positions of influence, at least in their organizations, they should try and change that.
Yes, I agree. Ritesh, today learning is not nice to have, but it is the need to have. And the outcome that we are talking about can also be different for an individual and different for an organization. To that point, we have a question from Diksha Avasti, and she's asking how can aspirational skill sets align with an organization's business goals?
Right. So I'll take that one, Pooja. Actually, I wanted to add something to the earlier point, but I'll try and club this because I think the earlier one, the question asked compliments to the person who asked that question. I think it was a very good question. So I've been reading about, recently we were talking about agility at work. And of course, for the people who are interested, reading about how Satya Nadella transformed Microsoft, the culture at Microsoft with only one belief, and that is Carol Dweck's concept of growth mindset. And growth mindset, agility, continuous learning, all of this actually forms a large part of a chain of learning and business outcomes. So it's a brilliant case study. But having, aspirational, how do you really get people to be aspirational and also have a culture? How do you sort of manage this? And one of the things that, I've realized that while it's great, I myself said that, yes, we must have career paths. We must give the flexibility to the learners to take up courses, learners to choose career paths. What I think is somewhere missing today is the involvement of the seniors playing the role of a coach. Because I think what happens typically is that, sometimes, again, wearing the learner information available, there's so many platforms available, they're lost, they need a little bit of coaching, they need somebody to show them the light. So I think, there is definitely a very ardent need for managers of people wearing the coach's hat, where they can actually take this up and have these coaching conversations, linking and trying to understand what their aspirations are and how do they link this back with work and performance. Because, sometimes we all feel, and maybe many of us are intrinsically motivated and, are very resilient, but there are many who aren't, and they need that guiding hand. So I think sometimes aspirational conversation, discovery conversations are extremely important to be done. And yes, while of course, things have to be linked to performance and, we want to create that performance culture, but I think a culture of nurturing talent or really listening to what they want, really needs to start at the onboarding stage. So what we do differently in Wellspun is that from the time the person is interviewed, there's so much of information that one is gathering even at the interview stage. The person talks about their strengths, they talk about their aspiration. And most often than not, organizations sort of fail to capture that and see how do you leverage that through their entire journey. So my recommendation and what we practice here is having those conversations, having powerful onboarding conversations with your manager, setting up an individual development plan. And honestly, it's not that difficult. It takes a couple of conversations and working with your employees through the year. Right. And then telling them that, hey, I may not have the time to sit and teach you or probably skill you. And thereby you need to go and, find your way, choose your career, figure out your aspiration, but let me provide you the tools and resources, but let me help you funnel it down and narrow your focus probably. So I think it's equally important that one is to prepare a career framework, show the path, provide the tools, resources, but also for managers and senior leadership teams to wear the hat of a coach and really listen to employees and acknowledge their aspirations. And I think that's when the best of both worlds can meet.
Thank you, Vidisha.
If we have time, can I add one thing here?
Sure.
So, see, in a tech industry, I think the question was that how do we encourage employees to learn parallel skills, right? Something that they might not be needing on their jobs today. In our industry, in the technology industry, what we tell people is that I am worried about two engineers and a dog sitting in a garage. And what I mean by that is I don't know who's disrupting my business where. Right? And what's important for companies is to set up those garages in their office. So we need to have innovation labs. In one of my previous organizations, we used to call it a garage actually. And the look that we had given it was a garage, but we had everything out there, which was a modern technologies and equipment, which we might not even need in our business. But it was just for people to come there, play with them, and generate curiosity and a learning mindset in them. And sometimes this investment goes a long way in creating that culture that we all aspire to create.
Yeah, to that point, we've had leaders who've come and shared with us that they've had meditation rooms in their workplaces, so it helped people to kind of, quieten their minds and then come back to work, and then they are more explorative and they can think out of box. So I guess these techniques do help. One more question I'll take from the audience. This is by Ayushi. What are futuristic skills and behaviors which are industry agnostic that the panel feels are must to learn today? It would be helpful to have a view on that. How do we ensure as organizations we build an urgency for new learnings? I think they put two questions in one.
I think it's a brilliant question, Ayushi. So if you look up the research from World Economic Forum of Jobs of Future 2025, the report came out last October. Very insightful. It's a very detailed report, but if I'll call it one specific section. So they identified the top 15 skills of the future, looking at 2025 across industries. What's interesting is in those 15 skills, only 2 are related to technology. One is related to service orientation. Rest all are what we call cognitive or behavioral skills. Top of the list being learning agility or growth mindset is one of the top 2. There are a bunch of skills around problem solving, creativity, so on and so forth. And there are also skills around emotional intelligence, resilience, social influence, which I think is a good definition of leadership. So even when you don't know the answer, you raise your hand and say, let's solve the problem together. So if you look up the list, you'll see out of 15, 12 to 13 are behavioral, cognitive skills, I think, which are industry agnostic. Also looking at the scale at which machines are taking away the repeated tasks we're all doing across industries. The higher order ability of us to assimilate, take decisions with or without information, with influence, with collaboration is what will cut across all industries. So that's just a quick summary. Yeah.
One more audience question. With people from different generations working together, how can we meet their diverse learning and development needs?
So I have a slightly different take on this, and panelists, please feel free to challenge it. I don't think it is learning needs. So the way people like to learn, I'm not sure how generational it is, because I clearly do not fall in the millennial or Gen Z generation. But I do consume a lot of learnings in the fashion that, probably more than what my kid does from those channels. So I think, and I'm coming across, as Ritesh said, right, people from, and Ritesh should also be good to answer this question, coming across from campuses who demonstrate a learning style which is more my generation. So I think that's there. What is also getting challenged is that, and when Ritesh said that we are certifying, and to answer your question, right, why continuous learning? This is why, because Ritesh gets campus hires to be really well learned, certified, and sends it to people like us. And then we get shocked because they obviously know more than we do, and therefore starts our continuous learning journey. But so I think the whole ability for us to curate how people like to absorb learning and know that learning is not required only at a certain segment, but across. And I think with emerging technologies, emerging skills, what Anil said just now in terms of those skill sets, I think when I graduated, probably doing your MBA or a management was good enough. Today, when I look at the kids of my friends who are getting out into the corporate sector, the kind of careers they're pursuing is phenomenal. So I think that's where every generation needs to learn. And that's my viewpoint to it, but I'm happy to listen to anything that others may have.
So, Pooja, Anil here. I'll quickly second what Anand said with a little bit of quantitative input. So, for a business unit of 2,000 to 3,000 people in my current organization, we ran a learning org survey, which is based on Peter Singer's fifth discipline. So I'm just taking a small nugget out of it. So we added a section on learning preferences. We didn't call it learning styles because that's outdated. Neuroscience has proved there's no learning style, there are only learning preferences. So when we did statistical analysis, this is across employees all levels, juniors, managers, leaders. When we clustered, there were only 2 or 3 clusters. And people from various generations or age groups were falling into the clusters. So I agree to what Anand is saying, more from the quantitative analysis we have done in the context of our organization, that people have preferences and you can be from different generation and have a similar learning preference. Obviously, once you look at those clusters, what we're doing is we're trying to look at our learner landscape and divide them into persona 1, persona 2, persona 3. But those personas are not homogeneous, they're heterogeneous in itself. So from that perspective, I agree with what Anand is saying.
Thank you, Anil. So my next question, I would want a view from the industry as well as from Ritesh. The question is very simple for employees today. Do accreditations and certifications matter?
See, I think learning is obviously not dependent on certifications or accreditations. But at the end of the day, it does give an individual some joy to see a certificate as a reward when it comes after the learning. As well as the industry and a lot of our panelists, as well as a lot of practitioners in the audience, sometimes do value a certificate or a degree when it comes to actual job progress or career progress for individuals. So the answer is yes, they matter. However, in terms of our corporate partners, a large variety of them are now coming to us for skill certificates, which are basically agreed between the organization and us on certain parameters that individuals have to demonstrate when they graduate out of the program. They don't come with any university certificate. They don't come with any accreditations, but university accreditations. But these are more skill-based certificates that organizations recognize. And therefore, the individual has a certain outcome as a reward at the end of it. But the certificate is more like a joint certificate between us and organizations.
One more.
Pooja, I'll add to it. I completely agree with Hitesh. Certifications matter today. And today certifications matter more because the way certifications are given, they have changed. In the past, certifications were more about learning something and passing an exam. Today, to get a certification, you have to learn something and show in practice of having implemented that learning. So if I look at somebody in my organization who says, I'm so-and-so certified, I know that the person has not only learned the subject, but person has implemented the subject. And it's that implementation that matters to us. And the certification tells us that the person has implemented it and the learning has been utilized on a real world problem.
Just a quick comment, Pooja, on the earlier question, actually. I think that's an interesting one. I feel irrespective of the target audience, or that is the age of an individual, we believe that digital learning skills are interesting for everyone. And what's interesting for everyone, people actually consume, and what they consume, they actually, with interest, they actually learn out of it. So we see, and we've run experiments around this, we've actually seen a lot of our senior audience being equally interested and motivated to go through blended models of delivery that we use across programs. And sometimes, because with experience and with age, they are more disciplined than the younger audience. Sometimes the outcomes are even higher. So I think the mode of delivery should move as per tech interest as well as engagement, whatever drives that higher, and not as per different for different ages.
Thank you, Ritesh.
It is literally a number in this case and nothing else.
I just want to share one small thing. So, when I go for these 10-kilometer marathons, after you finished it, you have to really wait for some time before you start getting those medals. But, however tired I am, and it may take up to 1 hour also, but I want my medal. So, I guess that it really feels good when you get certificates. And one audience question. So the question is, attention span of individuals is decreasing and people are okay to do a Google when needed, but not sit through programs or self-learn in a structured way. How do we bring in the discipline of learning?
I give a simple answer. Radhika, you wish to? Maybe
no, it's good to go ahead. You go ahead and I can add to your inputs, yes.
In my case, it's simple. Instructional design, go back to basics and build it down. For me, it was crazy, right? For us, when with the pandemic coming in, going back to basics, looking at what is required. But I think both works. There are people who want quick absorption, but we've also seen a lot of people demanding thorough, robust, classroomish environments so in my experience, both work. I don't think one is getting declined yet compared to the other, but go back to the way we design things. Sorry, Radhika, over to you.
I was just about to say this, that I think it's go back to, how we design things. And I think that's taking care of this. One is that, you've got content on disposal, which is nothing different from, all the LXPs that we talk about are like Google, right? But also how you're designing content today, and even if they are these journeys or curated programs, and how you create those blended journeys, which are just not the classroom sessions, but it's about, you really correct kind of, having that entire cohort based learning, which is more experience sharing, a little bit of learning, instructional sessions. So, I think it's about, how you're going to go back to that, ILT and, really going to look at something which aligns with the audience that you're looking at. So, but yeah, completely agree that, things have become bite-sized, but I think it's just not bite-sized. I think it's about, really looking at what your audience really needs. And then you go back to the design of the program to really cater to that. So it's basically, there's no one size fit all kind of solution here.
I want to bring Ritesh. Yeah.
Sorry. When I attended a full day classroom session on Zoom, and I was like, till that time, I was like, not more than 2 hours, not more than 3 hours. And I did a very detailed behavioral kind of a program. And I sat through the entire 8 hours and I did not think it was out of bounds. So on Zoom, entire day is possible and very engaging. Sorry.
I want to bring Ritesh and ask him that why is cohort-based learning still, very attractive for learners?
No, I don't think it's attractive for learners because learners would like it self-paced at their own pace, at their own speed, but we believe as a learning organization and a lot of our partners who invest in these programs for business outcomes, they believe that a certain amount of discipline is required in learning. And if people had to learn on their own, there's enough and more content available on Google, they would have picked it up and learned on their own. So, there is a certain discipline required. And with cohort-based learning, there is that visibility in a social environment where there are other learners and there is some bit of positive motivation or pressure, I would say, for individuals to perform and actually absorb and do well. Also, there are, a lot of business outcome exercises. Our programs are a combination of active lab sessions plus projects. A lot of them are just done better in a group environment. And therefore, it's always better if a certain group progresses together. Now, this doesn't apply to all kinds of programs, but in certain cases, cohort-based learning certainly works well. And we do propose it as a model that drives outcomes.
Yeah, and it's an opportunity to network, to make relationship, which also is very important.
Yeah.
There is a question from audience. I think Anil, it's a question on what point you made. So it says, like Anil mentioned, behavioral cognitive skills are imperative for an individual to succeed today. However, despite knowing this, are organizations giving enough importance to these behavioral cognitive skills while hiring and even for existing employees? Also, what can organizations do to ensure behavioral skills are given the focus they need? This question is by Nitish.
Yeah, Pooja, I can go first and then other panelists can add. So at CGI, when we hire and train graduates, one of the factor on which, in a typical 12-week graduate training of technical grads, we have 3 to 4 assessments. We call them toll gates. And each of those assessments has a behavioral or cognitive assessment plugged into it. And we work with a partner. So one of the score we get is called fluid intelligence, which is another name for growth mindset or learning ability. So it's not just telling us how good the person is, but also what's their ability to learn faster. So we're trying to use that information. So let's say there's a project where the timeline to deployment is shorter. Then I have two perfect candidates with great scores, but one has a higher fluid intelligence. Who would I choose? The person with higher, because they can assimilate faster. So that's one example of how we're using. Another example is if I scale it to at leadership level. So, top talent leadership programs, like talking about people at director and VP levels, when we put them through battery of simulations. In one case, we put them through an 8-hour simulation of running a hypothetical organization and test their, business skills. So one of the competency measure there is agile leadership, which is again founded on learning agility. And for everybody who's going through a top talent program, we actually know their agile leadership goals. It's called out through the Hogan assessment. So, and then we kind of look at that too, not just how they're doing now, but what's their ability to flex and be more agile in their approach. So those are 2 examples. And the last one is just last week, we launched a pilot program of on growth mindset with a cohort of 600 employees. And I'm really excited to go through. It's a 3-month blend learning, like as all of us talking. So it's a big launch I'm part of. So it's a pilot, so we'll see how it goes. But those are some examples I wanted to share.
Thank you, Anil. Anybody would like to share another point? Okay, we've had excellent discussions. Thank you, panelists, for sharing your insights. I would just like to conclude that based on what you've shared, definitely it looks like that plugging skill shortage is a priority for all of you. And the long-term and short-term benefit it brings to both employees and organization, definitely outweighs all costs and all the effort that goes into it. Lifelong learning is essential, and it helps to develop a performance-driven and centrally aligned workforce who's inquisitive, curious, explorative in nature, and they bring their best foot forward to help organizational transformation. With that, we close today's session, and once again, thank you from ETHRWorld's team to join us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us here.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.